Well, welcome to the Grazing Sheep Podcast with Tom Perkins and Cameron Meyerly. Today we're going to be talking about lambing. Are you all done with your lambing, Cameron?
I am done. Yep, we started January 1st and ended there January 29th. And everything went well. Didn't get too many issues, which is always nice. Um, but yeah, how about yourself? Any big issues or
Well, we started January 27th and just finished up yesterday. And that was with the mature group. And then we've got about a week and a half window, and we ought to start seeing those maiden ewes lambing. And probably the only issue we had was one ewe who had a vaginal prolapse, and then afterwards that went into a uterine prolapse,
hmm,
and
okay.
didn't end well for her.
Right. Yeah, all done. Out on the pile.
Yep. So
Okay.
it was one of those things where we put a harness on her, and then actually used a spoon. And I never understood what a spoon would do until I actually used the spoon. And then I'm like, oh, well, that actually makes sense. It keeps everything from turning inside out.
Right.
So,
Nice. What do you know yet what your lambing percentage was like?
well, if I was a mathematical scholar, I could figure that out. But we had, I think it's around 179%
Okay.
is what we
Okay.
ended up with.
And this would be a month earlier than you're normally lambing, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. The
Okay.
last 2 years, we've moved it up a month every time.
And that's with all mature ewes
And that
in
was,
this group.
yep, that was all
Okay.
mature ewes.
So what have you been at in March in previous years? Around that 179, 180?
I would say probably closer to the 150 because we were
Oh,
always
really?
having, but because I was always had the maiden ewes in there as well.
In with the group. Okay.
Yeah. But I'm
Okay. I was
surprised, that some of these had singles. Of course, they had singles as maidens, and then they had singles again.
right.
And kind of tracing that back to one ram that I had used, that Tim ram. He had good conformation, but not. I don't think he had a lot of fertility traits.
Right.
So
Right. I was
they,
curious. That's uh something we've run into in the past. This year we were lambing in January. 2 years we lambed in 2 years ago, lambed in January as well, and we were right around that um, kind of 1.7 to 1.8 range two
mhm.
years ago. Last year pushed it back because of where Easter fell. Um, on the mature ewes, lambing a month later, we were in that 210 range. And then this year again, starting to lamb in early January, back down to that 1.8 range. And not that there's any significant research designed to that, um, but just kind of anecdotal data might be indicating that as we get in season, further into a normal in season breeding, at least with our genetics, we're probably losing out on 20 to 25% number of lambs born um, in that
Mhm.
lambing earlier in the season, which is kind of interesting. So depending on the year and what kind of prices you're getting for those Easter lambs, um, figure out whether it pencils to take a hit at the market or um, take a hit in the lambing jug. But that's something I haven't sat down and kind of crunched yet. But it, that's kind of always been that discussion, even surrounding like fall lambing
Mhm.
with that reduced fertility. But
Yeah, it makes you wonder if you can just wait that extra month or month and a half.
right,
Is it going to give you that extra 25% of lambs?
right, and it depends too what you're trying to do with those. If you need the cash flow, um, and I'd argue if you're at a kind of stagnant number, for example, if you got 100 ewes and you'd like to stay around 100 ewes, maybe it makes sense to lamb them in January, take a little bit of hit on lambing percentage, and have more lambs to market early. Versus if you're at that 100 ewes and would like to get to 200, and you're going to do that through ewe lamb retention, maybe it makes of that 25%. Does that give you additional ewe lambs to keep?
Yeah, that's exactly
It's
it. It's all about your own context, what you want to do.
something to consider.
We always hear the Greg Julies of the world telling you, hey, you got a problem, you just get rid of her. Well, that's
Right.
easy to do when you got as many as you want. When you're trying to grow,
Right.
you're keeping the problem ones too.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, and that's
anything that'll put another 50% chance of a ewe lamb on the ground, you kind of want to keep that. Just
yeah,
get
and
the numbers.
that's where, as important as calling is, I'm of the opinion, as long as you're going into it knowing that you're keeping that individual that you shouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
that at least gives you a pass. When you, when you get the negative side effect down the road, I probably shouldn't admit this. A couple years ago, we dealt with some mastitis issues, solely due to management, and the ewes that were affected there were some really good ones, there were some not so good ones, and we're not talking like flock wide mastitis, but of the 4 or 5 that we ran into issues with, there were 3 of them that I knew we already had daughters in the flock, and milk output was phenomenal, and ran into issues because we were weaning probably a little early to hit that ethnic market. And so ran into some mastitis issues in those ewes, and just couldn't bring myself to get rid of them. And so last year it actually worked out. I know of the 3 in that example, one had 2, lost one of them, was a stillborn, so it's like perfect. She's got one half of her udder left. She's got a single. We'll run with it. The other 2 ewes had singles, and it's like, it for this situation is like perfect.
Yeah.
Well, then fast forward to 2023, and all 3 had triplets.
Oh, geez.
So all of a sudden I'm stuck with, I'm not going to force them to try to feed. If they had 2 functional teats, they'd be raising those triplets, and they've done that in the past. But we pulled, those 6 lambs off and bottle fed them. And maybe that was more as punishment to myself, for being silly and keeping those ewes that I probably should have got rid of. But I think knowing that you're getting yourself into the potential issue is a large part of that, kind of reconciling that decision on whether to get rid of those individuals. And by all means, should we be calling them? Yeah, we probably should. But we're still in a period of growth and trying to expand. And again, they weren't being called for their own issues, but issues through management. So
yeah, I've got a few that have been on the call list for
a couple years.
Couple of years at least. A couple woolies that just won't shed. And they're going to go for sure this year.
Right.
We wanted to hit that 100 ewe number, and then not saying that we won't grow, because we probably will, but
Right.
at least now you don't feel quite so bad. If you have 10 and you get rid of 2, that's a big hit.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned woolies, and there's some Katahdins in your background. maybe give some background on why you went with Katahdins and what interested you in those, and why maybe that woolly uh, adjective is a negative in the Katahdin world.
Well, I raised beef cattle. I grew up on a dairy farm, and then raised beef cattle after that, and just wasn't penciling out in the whole rotational grazing. And you just kept looking at it and saying, this just, you couldn't run enough cows on this farm to ever make any kind of a living, let alone much show a profit. But you kept reading in beef magazines, they kept talking about Katahdin sheep. And so which I still think is weird, that there'd be articles about Katahdin sheep in beef magazines. But I started looking into those and found out you didn't have to shear them. And one sentence in one of those articles said that the Katahdins were like the Hereford cattle of like Herefords in the beef cattle.
So you were sold.
I was sold. I was like, yeah, Herefords, you don't have to do a whole lot with them. They usually can just take care of themselves, usually pretty good mothers. And I started looking into the Katahdins and thought, well, if that's the same deal. And of course, Katahdins are like any other breed. You've got good ones, you've got bad ones. And I drove about 6 hours to Dryden, New York, and was going to buy 10. The lady had 11 in a pen, and she kept saying, "Please don't just leave me with just one." Because he was selling out to go to North Carolina to be with her father, who was not in good health, and then she was planning on coming back and starting another flock. But so we started with those 11, and I think they were pretty decent. The first year we just kept the ram lamb out of there, and that's where we got the woolies.
Mm.
All those woolies go back to that ram.
So did you start? You mentioned there's good ones and bad ones in the breed. You start with good ones or bad ones?
I think we started with probably middle of the road.
Okay.
One of the questions I asked when I bought them was, "What do you worm with?" Because I had read an article where somebody had talked about they went and bought some sheep and drove 5-6 hours to get them, brought them home, and right away ran into parasite issues. They called their vet, and their vet told them to use something like Valbazin or something. And they were using Valbazin, and it wasn't working. And after losing a bunch of them, they finally called the people they bought them from, and that person said, "Well, don't use Valbazin because Valbazin doesn't work here anymore."
Great.
But in the person that bought them in their area, Valbazin was still working, but they brought in, different worms. So I asked that question, "What did she worm with?" And she said, "Well, I have to go back through my records and look." And she went through and she said, "Well, 6 years ago, I wormed one." It's not like she used Prohibit or something like that. And she
Right.
went back like 2 or 3 more years, and she goes, "I had to worm another one." And I was like, "Well, good Lord, if that's all the more you're worming, I'm not worried about it."
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
we brought them home and just started from there, and that was 2017. Brought them home in
Okay.
February, and they started lambing in March.
Okay. Nice. You haven't looked back.
Nope, never looked back. Stood there at the pen when we first put them in and said, "I don't know anything about sheep."
Yeah.
I knew
So
so
from
little, I didn't even know
2017,
what question to ask.
yeah, from 2017 to now, and you like them so much, how many cows are left
No
grazing?
cows. Sold the
Okay.
cows in the spring. What is this? This is 23. Spring of 22. I sold the cows.
Okay.
No more cows. Still have I think there's 37 that will be bred in the spring that are out on grass,
Okay.
along with 4 ornery goats and a livestock guardian dog.
Right.
So,
Nice.
so they're just out there grazing away.
Yeah.
They don't
And
look they don't look great, but I think it's because they're just being out in the weather.
right.
But they don't look horrible either.
Right.
I've had some horrible looking ones over the years.
Yeah. So I guess with the Katahdins that you have now and with selling the cows, kind of moving forward, what's your goal with the sheep, or what would you like to achieve with the flock that you've established and are selecting for?
Well, I'd like to be filthy rich and take over the world, but people have told me you're setting your goals too high. No, I'm just shooting for getting filthy rich.
Perfect. Perfect. Yep. Scrap the taking over the world bit. That's probably safe. Seems the
Yeah,
cheap.
I just don't have enough time for that. I have trouble just keeping up with Facebook. I don't know how I'm gonna keep up with the whole world.
Right.
The what we were shooting for all along was to try to be in a position where we could sell decent, good breeding stock. And Katahdin's definitely a growing breed. I think there's a market, for good stock. Ours are for the most part registered. There's a few. I think we've got 7 commercials left that I bought from a guy a while back, and those have been bred to registered lambs, so those lambs can be recorded. And there's a few in there that have turned out to be pretty decent ewes. But so they're kind of on the call list. If I can't find another reason to call out, 15 or 20 this spring, then that probably be a reason they would go. Those older ones that were just
Is
commercial.
yeah, the commercial side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so just doing almost 100%, grazing. Still bringing those in to lamb in the barn because I just feel just safer and more comfortable. And I'm getting old. I don't want to be chasing lambs all over the pasture fields.
Right. And it does when we start to increase ewe flock size. Um, you're collecting a lot of data, being involved with with NSIP, and that's probably a discussion for
Hmm.
another date. But you're not just lambing ewes out and kicking them out to grass and just bringing lambs in.
Yeah, we're collecting all
Weaning.
that data,
Right.
birth weights
Right.
and so on, and we're part of that GEMS program. I don't know if you do
So I've heard.
that.
So I've heard. You and everybody else except for me, but I don't know that I want to. I don't know if I want to just look at udders all the time.
Well, that's
But
it's been interesting
yeah,
to look at them. It's something I never paid any attention to before, but it's funny, growing up on a dairy farm, I kind of look at some of these, I'm like, that's a
right,
good udder, you know,
right.
and it's funny because every time I look at them, the first thing I do is equate it to a cow, you
Yeah,
know, what I would call a good udder, what I call a bad udder. And
and there's a lot of individuals um, kind of your old school guys that will tell you when they go, especially in the commercial side of things, they go to pick out a ram or a ram lamb. I want to see mom.
yeah,
What's mom look like? What type of phenotypic value are we going to um, provide to those daughters?
hmm,
And so that can be pretty telling on what you're going to have. And you can certainly, if you're not careful, run yourself into a ditch pretty quick, dealing with issues. But
yeah. It was funny because until this gem thing, I just didn't pay that much attention to others. We just
yeah,
reached down and grabbed them and looking for hard others,
right,
and I never thought about teat placement before,
right.
and all that. And now that I'm looking at teat placement, and you look at these lambs and how they're nursing, and you start thinking, there's a lot to that. You have
Yeah,
ewes with the teats way up on the side, and some of them are so high that the lambs have trouble finding those right away.
right.
And then I guess the goal is to have them like straight down so that you can get all the milk out of them. But you wonder too, how hard is that for a lamb to find?
Yeah, and that's when we're thinking about what's ideal. I think a lot of it has to do with that suspension, kind of
Mhm,
midline suspension, and um, where that teat placement is out on the side. And growing up with sheep that had wool, you're going through and crutching those ewes or shearing them 30 days out from lambing,
mhm.
and you would get a feel. It made a difference because um, you would look at udders as they were forming, and then you're also trying to clean that area up because what are they what are they grabbing onto? Wool tags if you're not getting it
Yeah,
off. Um, yeah, I think just my short experience with the Katahdin breed, my sheep personally, there's a lot of variation,
Oh yeah.
and there's certainly some sire lines, some genetic lines that tend to correlate, or the comparisons are much closer between those individuals with udder size, teat placement, suspension, and it's something to definitely take note of, um, and goes back to why we're not just looking at a spreadsheet and saying, "I'm going with that one," because on paper they look really, really good.
Yeah.
Um, but I enjoy having that paper to go back to. Um,
Well, I do as well. I definitely going back and looking at that all the time. I heard a guy say one time that he gets his data back from the NSIP, and he'll look at the data, and then he runs out and looks at the lamb, and then he's just heartbroken. 'Cause
right.
the
Yeah.
data looks great and the lamb looks horrible. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and that's I know, like I said, we can talk about NSIP another time, but um, one thing that I've heard Rusty mention is figure out what's going to work for you phenotypically,
Hmm.
and go in and see if the numbers line up and if you can justify that use.
Yeah.
Um, and that's hopefully that kind of helps with the heartbreak. I think it can probably still occur,
Yeah.
um, but
So
maybe might mitigate it somewhat.
so getting back to lambing, what are the things
Yes.
you think you have to have when you're lambing?
Yeah. So I see a lot of videos on social media, and something that, uh, yeah, even with little kids, something that I don't know if it bugs me, rubber gloves. I don't care if you're using an OB sleeve. By the time that we need to intervene, usually there is some type of presentation,
Hmm.
um, of front legs, if the head's in the right spot and they just need a little help, a pull. But there's a box of rubber gloves that we keep in the barn in a cabinet ready to go. And I'm to the point now where I just put them on before I do anything. Um, and then those OB sleeves are sitting right there. So if I need to sleeve that U, um, I just grab it and go. So for me, that is like item number one. Whether it's pathogen that I'm trying to prevent, um, pick up to myself, or more importantly, I don't want to be treating for um, uterine infections, some metritis issues that might come from exposure. So we try to keep things pretty clean and um, use OB sleeves. So that would be item number one. Um, we we haven't used it as religiously as maybe what we have in the past, because our lambs have been really vigorous this year. The ones that are maybe a little smaller, we've used a product called Survive. Um, Gives them a kind of a jump start and just a boost in energy. So if we've been working on one for a little while, um, and there were two that come to mind this year that were in there for probably longer than they needed to be.
Hmm.
Um, one was a 19 pounder single ram lamb,
Woo.
that looked like a Jersey calf when he when he came out.
Yeah.
And then the other one I think was like 17 and a half
Wow.
single. I mean, you looked like she was having twins, and she had a big single, and it was
Wow.
a big single. Um, but both of those, kind of were. And the one, that second one was actually like was coming breech, and kind of got locked at its shoulders and had to tug pretty good. But when they're inside for that long, if we can give them a jump start with some extra energy, we like to do it. So that would be on the list.
So what's that called again?
It's called Survive.
Survive.
Uh, I believe it's coming from Hunter Nutrition. I know Premier One sells it.
Okay.
It would be similar. Everybody talks about NutriDrench.
Okay.
Um, Similar product.
Okay.
So just kind of that first shot of energy, and I can kind of give that and feel like obviously they need colostrum. I
Mhm.
can give that and walk away. And if it's a boost in energy to get them up to the teat,
Yeah.
great. I'm not sitting there with them for 2 hours trying to get them to
Yeah.
smarten up and nurse.
So that 19-pound lamb, was it already born with an ear tag in it?
Yeah, actually went to Mount Hope the next week and cashed in at five five
60
dollars a pound. So
65 pounds, huh?
she's back with the ram now getting bred for falls. So no,
Yeah.
no, I wish. Um but yeah, and honestly, we probably run into more. I know when we were running the club lamb ewes, um, those big ones were just dumb. You know, I
Oh,
will
yeah.
take that 6 pound small twin or small triplet that maybe has a will to live, and if they don't have a will to live, I don't really want them.
Mhm.
Um, but they seem to catch on more quickly than those big dumb ones that are just kind of loafing around. But um, they're both, and it seems just mobility issues that that 6 pound lamb can get up and move. Um, but with the 17 pounders, they they got long legs. So they're not up and at it like we'd like to see.
Huh.
Um, but yeah, that's just been kind of our experience. We've never had Katahdins that big before, and like I said, there's only been a couple of them. And I think I've mentioned to you in the past, we were running them pretty hard on some hayfield residue before lambing,
Mhm.
and I was concerned because our first lamb wasn't was pretty lethargic.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, if this is what the next 100 lambs are going to be like, it's is going to be terrible. Unfortunately, he was an oddity, and I think it's just a testament to how hardy these sheep are. Because I felt a little guilty. I knew we were behind the eight ball on getting them, fed up to parturition to lambing, um, and they said we'll take that stockpiled orchard grass and fescue and put it to the babies. So
Well, that's
we've
good.
been we've been pleased this year. But yeah, I guess back to um, items. We give a BOCI shot, so we make sure that we've always got BOCI on hand. At lambing, they get a shot of BOCI with
How much
clipped
of that are you
umbilical.
giving?
What was that?
How much Bosie are you giving?
I think working with our vet, his prescribed amount is half a cc, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Um, and I don't know in terms of milligrams per pound of body weight what that equals out to, but I have a pretty good relationship there with a local vet, and so we'll give that shot. We'll dip or clip dip um, those umbilical cords um, with iodine and kind of turn them loose with mom. They're usually in the jug for 24 hours as long as we have the space, and then they get kicked out to a group pen. Um, and if we have the space, group pen, and then what we call gen pop, um,
Yep.
and go from there. But um, yeah, outside of that, I can't think of anything. Yeah, a sling and scale to take birth weights with. That's probably my least favorite lambing task. Um,
We just put them in a 5-gallon bucket and then hang them
and
on the
go.
scale.
Yeah,
Yep. And
the
most of the
bucket's
time, if you're
the way
quick
to go.
about it, they won't be, thrashing around too much. But we try to do
Right,
that pretty quick because if you let them get 12, 14 hours old, they hit that bucket and they want out.
right,
With
right,
with
right.
a spring scale, it's kind of hard to get that
Thing
weight because that's
that
bouncing
needle
all over
to
the place. Yeah,
fit.
needles all over the place.
Yeah, we grabbed it wasn't terribly expensive on Amazon. Grabbed a digital scale, um,
Mhm.
and that seems to be working well for us.
Good.
Um, and it goes up to like 50 pounds or something. I hope
Mhm.
we never have to weigh a 50-pound lamb, or it will go to Mount Hope the next day.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's probably my least favorite task just because it's like the thing I feel like takes the most time, um, that is like the bottleneck in our operation. But
Yeah.
in the middle of
CJ's usually helping me. He's my
okay,
hired guy here, and it's always a
right,
big game. So he picks them up, and I'm writing the information down, and he sets it in a bucket, and I take the bucket and I walk over to the scale, and he guesses how much it weighs, and then I guess the over or under.
right, right, right. Yeah,
And then he gets mad because I'm more right than he is, but it's
yeah.
pretty
I
easy.
think
You're just guessing the over or under.
yeah, one right, one tool that um, we probably need to invest in that would make life simpler um, would would be a crook, something to grab those lambs in the jug, so I wouldn't
Mm,
have to open the gate or step into that pen.
yeah,
I could stand on the outside, just reach to the back corner, pick them up with
yeah.
that, and bring them close. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, putting ear tags in the
Hmm.
jug instead of chasing using lambs around and saying, okay, this one's marked in here is the one with 2 brown spots. Or I know one year we just got hit hard and um, didn't didn't get tags in and didn't realize how many we didn't get tags in, but had descriptions down. And the issue was the descriptions of the uh, person writing the descriptions down. They were a little more vague than what they should have been. So we had a lot of uh, all white lambs in the description. It turns out about 85% of them were all white
All white
lambs.
lambs.
So, going, you'd spend a whole afternoon, pen everybody up in the creep pen when you finally got around to doing it, um, and letting a lamb out, see where it ran. And then you'd sit
Hmm.
there for 5 minutes and watch to see where he went and who
Yep,
he nursed off of. And then you'd say, okay,
that's who
we
that
know
is.
we know it's that one. So yeah, that's tags in the jug are a must.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, we definitely do that. It would
so
be. We have issues occasionally. A lamb will lose a tag, and we never
yeah,
find it till we're going through collecting data, and then it's like, oh, I hope there's only one. I hope there's only one. Yeah.
right.
And so
Yeah,
far, the most we've ever had was two, but one was a ewe and one was a ram, so it was easy to figure out
right.
who they were supposed to be. But yeah, you always wonder. So we're
Yeah.
coming up on our time here. So hopefully
Perfect.
we answered some questions about lambing, and we're hoping to continue on with this and keep uploading some podcasts and some videos, and let's see how we do with that. So we thank you for listening, and we hope to hear you again, or hope you'll hear us again, I guess is what it should be.
Right.
Uh, so this has been the Grazing Sheep podcast, and we hope you subscribe. So you have a good day, Cameron.
You too, Tom.
All right, bye now.